Right now, inside your home, that phone of yours is probably vibrating. There's a browser tab hanging open that you completely forgot about. A lingering thought from an argument yesterday is settled quietly in the back of your consciousness, poised to drag you off task the moment you try to focus. And here's a truth no one really warns you about. It's never going to stop. Not today. Not this year. The outside world isn't going to turn down its volume just so you can finally zero in on what matters. The chaos is constant. The only variable that can shift is you. 2 millennia back, a Roman ruler was seated in a tent at the edge of a battlefield, troops poised, his empire fracturing in places, and yet he managed to find enough stillness to compose some of the most intensely focused writings ever recorded. Marcus Aurelius wasn't dealing with fewer interruptions than you face. He carried the weight of an entire empire's worth of them. What he possessed was a framework, a collection of practices so effective that scholars still examine how a man bearing the entirety of Rome could maintain such crystalline clarity of thought. Today, you're about to discover that framework. A dozen habits from the Stoics, perfected over centuries, that won't just sharpen your concentration, they will fundamentally rewire how your mind functions at its core. Make sure you watch all the way through, because habit number 7 is the one nearly everyone gets completely backward, and it's probably bleeding hours from your day without you even noticing. This is Stoicisms Daily. Welcome back to Stoicisms Daily, the place where ancient thinking meets your everyday life, where we translate the robust insights of figures like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca into practical tools you can apply right now to your career, your connections, and those still moments when it's simply you and your own inner world. If you're new around here, think about subscribing. We drop new Stoic content designed to guide you toward a more composed, insightful, and self-disciplined version of yourself. And if you've joined us before, it's good to have you back. Before we dive in, I'd like you to do just a single thing. Turn your phone screen down, or even leave it in a different room. Not because this is some kind of ritual, but because what we're about to cover will only take hold if you give it the space to settle. The Stoics believed that wisdom absorbed, while distracted is wisdom squandered. So for the next 30 minutes, let's try to actually be fully present. Let's get started. Why concentration seems so difficult today? Before jumping into the practices, it's important to identify what we're up against. Not your gadget, not your career, not your family or your daily travel. The true obstacle to focus, according to the Stoics, is something much closer to home, the undisciplined mind. Epictetus, born into enslavement yet later rising to become one of Rome's most esteemed thinkers, introduced a radical idea for his time. He claimed that our suffering doesn't stem from external events, but from our interpretations of them. When we apply this to attention, it reveals something significant. Your concentration doesn't falter because of your device. It falters because your mind has never been conditioned to withstand the device's allure. The technology is simply the contemporary scapegoat. The core issue is internal. Consider the last time you attempted a meaningful task. Perhaps a work assignment, a critical discussion you needed to have, or even just settling down with a book. How many minutes passed before your thoughts wandered? 10, 5, perhaps 90 seconds. For most individuals nowadays, that span is remarkably brief. And it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because, like the vast majority, you were never instructed on how to manage attention. You received lessons in arithmetic. You studied history. No one taught you how to be at ease with your own thoughts without feeling the urge to flee. This is where Stoicism transforms from philosophy into a hands-on training guide. The ancient Stoics placed great emphasis on the ruling center, that part of you which determines where your awareness goes. They argued that if you neglect to train that center, something else will train it on your behalf. In their era, it was gossip, political machinations, the tumult of Roman civic life. In your era, it's pings, curated feeds, and bottomless scrolling. The habits we're about to explore weren't merely crafted for ancient times. They were crafted for the human psyche, and the human psyche hasn't evolved nearly as much as the environment around it. Let's start with the first practice, the bedrock for everything that follows. Practice 1, the first claim of the morning. Marcus Aurelius started nearly every day with a similar routine. Not with a screen, naturally, but with something equally demanding in his day, the weight of an empire. Dispatches from generals, petitions from politicians, crises crying out for his immediate response. Yet before any of that could reach his thoughts, he performed a simple act. He secured the opening moments of his day for himself. In his personal reflections, the collection we know as meditations, he coaches himself, almost like a mentor addressing an athlete pre-game. When you find it hard to stir at dawn, remind yourself, I must go about my duties as a human being. What reason do I have to complain if I'm doing what I was made for? This wasn't about productivity shortcuts. It was about assuming command. Before the world seizes your focus, you take hold of it first. Nowadays, most people wake up and instantly pass their mental focus to someone else. A message alert, a news snippet, a ping that wasn't truly for them, yet manages to demand a reaction. By the time they take their initial sip of coffee, their attention has been leased to 5 separate parties, none they consciously selected. The morning claim practice is straightforward in concept, but transformative in practice. Prior to checking your phone, prior to checking anything, take 5 to 10 minutes that are exclusively yours. Not scrolling, not hurriedly making plans, just being still, breathing, contemplating the day ahead on your own terms. Some keep a journal, some just enjoy the quiet. Marcus Aurelius noted, the method is less important than the principle. You decide first. The world can spare 10 minutes. It has been vying for your attention since the moment you entered this world. It can afford to wait a bit longer. Give this a shot tomorrow morning. Just once and observe, truly observe, how differently the rest of your day flows when you begin as the originator of your attention, not merely a passive consumer. Practice 2, the practice of pausing before reaction. There's something rarely mentioned about concentration. It's not chiefly about focus itself. It's about sorting every single second. Your mind is flooded with possibilities for attention. A noise outdoors, a memory surfacing, a creeping worry, a temptation to glance at your device. Just for an instant. Concentration isn't the act of blocking everything out through brute force. Concentration is the ability to decide, rapidly and consistently, what is worthy of your attention and what is not. The Stoics had a particular exercise for this. They termed it the discipline of assent. Essentially, before you act on a thought, a sudden desire, or an inclination, you pause even for a fraction of a second and question, does this warrant my focus or not? Most people bypass this entirely. A thought pops up. I should check what's happening online. Within moments, their hand is reaching for the device. There was no conscious choice. There was only reflex followed by action, with the mind serving as a passive observer. The Stoics regarded this as one of life's great misfortunes. Living entirely by reflex, never truly deciding anything, confusing reactivity with autonomy. To practice the discipline of assent, begin with small steps. The next time you feel an urge to pick up your phone during a task, don't obey it instantly, but don't fight it fiercely either. Simply observe it. Say quietly to yourself, I notice an urge. I'm not required to act on it this instant. Then go back to your work. That minor interruption, repeated many times each day, rewires the connection between impulse and movement. Over time, you cease being controlled by every small mental pull that arises. By itself, done with regularity, this stands as one of the most potent upgrades to your focus, because it tackles the fundamental source, not just the outward symptom. If this concept is clicking with you, drop a note in the comments saying, "Assent." I'd like to see how many of you are prepared to actually put this into practice, not just observe it. Practice 3, welcoming minor hardship. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, former advisor to an emperor, someone who enjoyed every comfort his age could provide, did something that appeared odd at first glance. He would sometimes deliberately adopt a simpler lifestyle. He'd eat plain food, wear rugged clothing, and rest on a firm surface, not out of need, but by his own choice. He explained this exercise in a letter to a friend, advocating that we should designate a few days to be pleased with the barest fare, so we can discover whether what frightens us is truly intimidating, and so our spirit can become accustomed to not being ruled by luxury. What does this have to do with concentration? Because a mind that has never known discomfort will instinctively retreat toward ease the moment focus becomes demanding. And focus always becomes demanding eventually. That's simply the reality of deep work. The 10th minute of a taxing task is uncomfortable. An untrained mind will frantically look for an escape route. A snack, a quick scroll, any distraction to avoid the unease of sustained effort. Deliberate hardship conditions you to endure this feeling without instantly avoiding it. You don't have to sleep on the floor like Seneca, but you can practice small variations daily, staying with a mildly unpleasant task a few more minutes before taking a pause, or fighting the very human desire to seek entertainment the instant boredom arises. Each time you accept discomfort instead of escaping it, you cultivate what current psychology calls distress tolerance, which the Stoics simply referred to as mental fortitude. This is the genuine engine behind sustained concentration, not ambition, not enthusiasm, but the trained capacity to remain with discomfort just a bit longer than the untrained individual can. Practice 4, the nightly self-assessment. At the close of each day, prior to sleeping, Seneca followed a ritual inherited from his instructor, Sextius. He would pose to himself a series of inquiries. Which negative habit have I addressed today? Which fault have I restrained? How am I improved? He characterized his mind as a magistrate reviewing the day's entire conduct, observing that this exercise yields immense tranquility. This may initially seem unrelated to focus, yet it's actually one of the most overlooked aids for improving it. Because without review, you never pinpoint what's truly siphoning your attention. You sense a general distraction, a vague sense of underperformance, yet you can't isolate the specific instances where your focus fractured, and what remains unnamed, you cannot address. The nightly review applied to concentration looks like this. Before sleeping, allocate 3 to 5 minutes to consider, when did I focus effectively today? When did my concentration break and what set it off? Was it a digital alert? A particular person? A specific time when my energy naturally dropped? You're not severely judging yourself here. The Stoics were well known for rejecting self-punishment through guilt. You're simply collecting information, like a researcher studying their own mental patterns. Continue this consistently for 2 weeks, and tendencies will surface that you were totally unaware of before. Perhaps you'll notice your focus weakens every afternoon around 3 p.m., which might indicate a different type of work for that slot, or a brief stroll instead of more caffeine. Perhaps you'll recognize it's not your phone breaking your focus, but a particular person who always contacts you with urgent matters that aren't really urgent. Once you can identify the adversary, you can build a targeted defense against it. This is the precision the untrained mind never achieves, because it never pauses to honestly examine itself. Practice 5, recalling your mortality. This next practice sounds heavy, and it is. But stay with me, because this is where we transition from tactics into something more profound. The Stoics engaged in what they called memento mori, remembering that you will die. Marcus Aurelius continually reminded himself of this fact, acknowledging that he could depart from life at any moment, and that this awareness should inform how he chooses to act and think in every instant. This wasn't a gloomy fixation. It was the reverse. It was a means to attain exceptional clarity. Here's the link to focus that most individuals miss. A significant portion of your scattered attention arises from operating under the assumption that you have unlimited time. When you think, even subconsciously, that you can always do the significant work tomorrow, your attention today becomes less valuable. You can squander it on petty online disputes, on endless scrolling, on distractions, because there's always later to make up for it. But the instant you genuinely absorb that your time is finite, not as an unsettling abstract idea, but as a tangible reality, your relationship with your own focus changes instantly. Suddenly, losing 2 hours to content that adds nothing beneficial to your life ceases to feel like a harmless break and starts to feel like a loss, because it is. It's a loss of the only asset you can never recover. Try this once daily. Take 15 seconds, just 15, and earnestly reflect that today is not guaranteed to happen again. Not to spiral into fear, but to sharpen your sense of what actually merits your attention today. Those who practice this consistently report an unusual outcome. The small distractions that previously seemed irresistible start to feel almost trivial compared to what they could be focusing on instead. This isn't about motivation. It's about clarity. And clarity is a far more enduring source of concentration than motivation could ever be. If this section is resonating more than the others, I want you to hit pause on the video right here for 10 seconds and just absorb it before you resume. Then return, because Habit 6 builds straight on top of this. Practice 6, distinguishing what is yours to control. Epictetus introduced his most renowned lesson, the Enchiridion, with one core concept so vital that everything else he taught was basically an extension of it. He noted that certain things fall under our authority and others do not. Our opinions, our urges, our desires, our own behaviors. These are within our authority. Our physique, our standing, the views of others about us, external circumstances, these fall outside our authority. This single distinction, correctly understood, might be the most impactful concentration technique ever created. And almost no one employs it properly. Here's the reason. A huge proportion of scattered focus comes from mentally grappling with things outside your control. You're attempting to concentrate on a project, but part of your mind is replaying a disagreement you can't change. Worrying about a result you cannot affect, or fixating on others' opinions of you, which are fundamentally beyond your control, no matter how much mental effort you pour into them. The dichotomy of control, exercised as a daily discipline, functions like a cognitive filter. The moment you notice your thoughts drifting toward something, ask, is this within my power? If yes, engage thoroughly. Focus wholly, because this is exactly where your attention belongs. If no, let it go on purpose. Not through denial, but through the understanding that expending energy here is like trying to grasp water. It will never succeed, regardless of your effort. And that effort itself is what depletes your focus in the first place. This is genuinely tricky initially because our minds become hooked on fretting over what we can't influence, and it feels productive even though it accomplishes nothing. But with repetition, you build what seems like a mental shield, instantly steering energy away from unmanageable interruptions and toward the manageable work directly before you. This single practice can recover hours of otherwise wasted mental energy every single week. Practice 7, the one most people have reversed. I mentioned this one earlier, and here it is. The practice that the majority completely misunderstand, and it's coming at a high cost. Many believe that focus comes from accumulation. More willpower, more drive, more productivity tools, more elaborate frameworks. The Stoics believed almost the exact opposite. They maintained that focus originates mainly from reduction, from clearing away the extraneous, not from exerting more force to push through the interference. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that ought to be posted in every workspace worldwide. If you desire peace, do less. He elaborates that most of our words and actions are unnecessary, and if you strip them away, you'll gain more time and less disruption. Observe what he's not advocating. He's not urging you to work harder to defeat distraction. He's urging you to eliminate the non-essential entirely, so there's less to struggle against in the first place. This is where people get it wrong. They attempt to develop superhuman concentration to power through an environment crowded with non-essential notifications, non-essential duties, non-essential obligations, and non-essential relationships that exhaust them. They're essentially aiming to become strong enough to carry a bag full of rocks they never needed to pack. The Stoic method is fundamentally different. Before you endeavor to increase your mental stamina, first ask what can be removed altogether. Practically speaking, this means performing a tough evaluation. How many notifications on your phone are truly necessary? Most people, upon checking, discover the number is close to none. How many meetings, commitments, or obligations in your week exist purely from habit or obligation rather than real necessity? How many relationships in your life demand constant emotional energy, leaving little left for your actual priorities? This isn't about becoming cold or distant. The Stoics deeply valued bonds and community. It's about being honest regarding what is vital versus what has simply gathered by default over years of never questioning it. Every single non-essential item you remove is attention you reclaim permanently, without ever having to exert extra effort. This is why some of the most centered individuals you'll meet don't appear to be striving harder than everyone else. They've simply removed nearly everything that isn't critical. So what stays gets their complete, undivided attention naturally. If you've stayed with this, you're clearly dedicated to genuinely reshaping how your mind operates, not just consuming another video on the subject. So, let me ask you honestly in the comments. What's one non-essential element in your life right now that you already recognize you need to let go of? Writing it publicly seems to help people actually follow through. Try it. Practice 8. Planning for obstacles. The Stoics had a method called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of hardship. In essence, they would psychologically simulate difficulties before they occurred. Seneca recommended envisioning exile, poverty, illness, even death, not to wallow in despair, but to diminish the shock and fear when hardships truly arose, and to value more deeply what you already have. Applied to concentration, this becomes an extremely useful exercise. Before starting a significant task, spend 30 seconds imagining the ways your focus could be derailed. Picture the phone notification. Picture the sudden desire to check something irrelevant. Picture the moment 10 minutes in when your mind craves a more comfortable distraction. By mentally rehearsing these moments in advance, you strip them of their ability to catch you off guard. When they do happen, and they will, there's a curious feeling of familiarity, almost as if you've already experienced this exact instant before, and already determined your reaction. This is a strategy elite performers in various fields use naturally, often without knowing its historical roots. Athletes mentally visualize competitors' potential actions. Surgeons mentally rehearse complications ahead of surgery. The Stoics simply understood 2,000 years earlier that the mind functions far better when it isn't blindsided by difficulty, but has already encountered that difficulty once in imagination before facing it in actuality. Practice 9. Single focus as a moral act. Here's a perspective that will transform how you view multitasking forever. The Stoics didn't use the term multitasking, of course, but their entire philosophy was founded on a concept that directly opposes it. The idea of performing every action with your whole mind, fully present to the task before you. Marcus Aurelius wrote about conducting every act of your life as if it were your final one, offering it your complete and serious attention, not because every act is monumental or important, but because the habit of giving partial attention to everything ultimately becomes the habit of giving partial attention to your entire existence. He believed that a divided consciousness, one constantly fragmented across multiple things, was actually an indication of disordered thought, not a sign of effectiveness. Contemporary research has verified what the Stoics understood without any laboratory equipment. The brain doesn't truly multitask. It rapidly alternates between tasks, and each switch incurs a cost. A small drain on your mental energy and the quality of your attention. Someone who believes they're exceptional at multitasking is often someone paying a huge, hidden price they never detect, because the price isn't evident at the moment. It appears later as mental exhaustion, as superficial output, as a lingering sense of having been occupied all day, while achieving little of genuine consequence. The Stoic practice here is elegantly straightforward. One task fully present, until it's finished, or until you deliberately decide to pause. Never splitting your focus as an involuntary default. This doesn't mean you can never transition between tasks. It means the switch is an intentional decision, not something that occurs to you every time a new trigger appears. Practicing single focus as a real discipline, the same way you develop patience or honesty, gradually rebuilds a kind of mental strength that constant task switching slowly wears down without you even realizing it. Practice 10. Embracing what occurs. This next concept is among the most frequently misinterpreted in all of Stoicism, and once you grasp it correctly, it becomes an extraordinary asset for concentration. Amor fati translates as love of fate, the practice of not just tolerating, but genuinely welcoming whatever happens, including the challenging, irritating, and inconvenient aspects of your day. Nietzsche later brought the phrase into focus, but the underlying Stoic idea traces back to Epictetus, who taught that we shouldn't desire events to unfold as we wish, but to wish them to unfold as they do, and then we will succeed. Here's the connection to concentration that shifts everything. So much mental energy is squandered on resisting reality rather than operating within it. Your connection is slow now. A coworker interrupted your deep work session. The current task is dull rather than engaging. The untrained mind spends vast amounts of energy resenting these facts, longing for things to be different, mentally disputing with reality itself, which notably never loses that argument because reality doesn't negotiate. Amor fati applied practically means the instant you catch yourself resisting a condition. This task is dull. This interruption is unfair. This day isn't following my plan. You consciously switch from opposition to acceptance, and then ask, given that this is exactly the situation, What's the most focused, most constructive thing I can do right now? This single adjustment saves an immense amount of energy that would otherwise be spent fighting a battle against reality that was never winnable. The energy you stop wasting on opposition becomes energy instantly accessible for actual focus. Practice 11. The high vantage point. Marcus Aurelius describes a mental exercise where he visualizes rising above the planet, looking down at all human activities from a great height. Armies, festivities, disputes, ambitions, all of it appearing minor and temporary from that distance. He applied this to gain perspective from problems that felt overwhelming up close, allowing him to return to his tasks with renewed clarity rather than being overwhelmed by anxiety. This might seem abstract, but it has an extremely practical application for concentration. When your focus is scattered because of anxiety over something, a conflict, a deadline, an uncertain result, that anxiety itself becomes a type of distraction, often more potent than any digital alert. The high vantage point technique works by deliberately expanding your view. Question yourself, in 5 years, will this particular concern still occupy my thoughts? In 100 years, will anyone recall this event at all? This isn't intended to make your problems seem insignificant in a despairing manner. It's intended to restore proportion, so that a minor hassle doesn't consume the same mental bandwidth as a genuine emergency. Those who practice this habitually develop something like an internal gauge for anxiety-related distraction. Instead of every worry expanding to occupy all available attention, they learn to gauge worries appropriately, giving major concerns major attention and minor concerns minor attention, freeing up a significant amount of mental space previously taken up by worries that, viewed from the right distance, never merited that much room. Practice 12. Consistent philosophical study. The final habit is perhaps the simplest, yet it's the one that connects all the others. The Stoics were relentless students of philosophy, not for amusement, but as a form of daily mental conditioning. The same way an athlete trains their body every day, not just in competition. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that he studied a certain amount each day and often returned to the same authors repeatedly, because wisdom needs to be revisited, not merely encountered once and stored away. Marcus Aurelius, despite governing an empire, still found time daily to read and reflect on philosophical principles because he understood a critical point. The mind, without consistent input of clarity and viewpoint, naturally drifts back toward noise, distraction, and disarray. It's not a one-time correction. It's upkeep. This is why watching a video like this one, as beneficial as it might feel now, isn't sufficient by itself. The habits described here need to be revisited, reread, and reflected on repeatedly, because the untrained mind will constantly try to revert to its former patterns the moment reinforcement ceases. This is exactly why so many people watch an inspiring video, feel motivated for a day or two, and then quietly slide back to their starting point. Daily reflection, even 5 minutes with a single Stoic passage, contemplated throughout the day, creates the repetition that true transformation demands. This is also, frankly, why this channel exists. Not to offer one video that changes everything, but to be a resource you return to again and again. The way the Stoics themselves returned to the same lessons across their entire lives, never considering themselves finished students of their own minds. Tying it all together, let's take a moment to survey what we've actually covered. Because these 12 habits aren't 12 separate techniques, they're one unified system, each part strengthening the others. The morning reservation claims your attention before the world does. The discipline of ascent trains you to pause before reacting to impulse. Voluntary discomfort builds your tolerance for the difficulty that focus inevitably requires. The evening review gives you the data to understand your own patterns. Memento mori provides your attention with genuine urgency and weight. The dichotomy of control redirects your energy only toward what you can actually affect. Doing less removes the unnecessary noise you'd otherwise have to battle. Negative visualization prepares you for distraction before it arrives. Single tasking restores the mental strength that constant switching erodes. Amor fati stops you from wasting energy resisting what's already happening. The view from above gives your worries their proper scale, and daily reading sustains all of it, because none of this works as a one-time event. It only works as a practice. None of these habits require money. None of them require special tools or a perfect setting. They require only the readiness to genuinely apply them repeatedly, especially when it feels tough. And that difficulty isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're doing exactly what builds a stronger mind. The same way resistance builds stronger muscle. Marcus Aurelius never had the benefit of a distraction-free setting. He wrote his personal reflections while handling plagues, wars, betrayals, and the relentless demands of governing an empire that never stopped needing him. If a man in that position could condition his mind to such clarity and concentration, then the modern distractions you're encountering, as real as they are, aren't truly insurmountable. They only feel that way to an untrained mind. And now you have the training. A final note. I want to leave you with something Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself. Words intended for no one else. Penned in the quiet moments when even an emperor needed to remind himself of what was essential. He observed that very little is required to make a happy life, because it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Your focus, your attention, your ability to sit with a single task and offer it everything you possess. None of that lives outside of you, waiting to be granted by improved conditions, a calmer home or a less demanding career. It exists within you now, waiting to be trained the way it was always meant to be trained. You don't need all 12 habits beginning tomorrow. Pick one. Maybe it's the morning reservation. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control. Practice it this week deliberately, the same way you'd practice any skill worth acquiring. Then add another. This is not a competition. The Stoics themselves spent entire lifetimes refining these practices and still considered themselves students, not experts. If this video gave you even one concept you intend to actually apply, do 3 things for me. Like the video so it reaches more people who need exactly this type of clarity at this moment. Comment below with which habit you're starting with this week. I read each one. And there's something powerful about writing your commitment where others can see it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Stoic Essence Daily, because we share new teachings every week designed to help you build a calmer, sharper, more disciplined mind, one video at a time. Thank you for spending this time with me today, fully present, the way the Stoics themselves would have wanted. I'll see you in the next one.